The pounding of her heart echoed the rhythmic drum of hooves against parched earth, as Nora Parker listened for any sign that her husband had returned. Arizona Territory, 1885, a place where the law stretched thin across vast expanses, where a woman's worth was measured by her obedience, and where Nora's 6 years of marriage to Harrison Lloyd had devolved into a prison sentence she couldn't escape. Worthless woman, Harrison had spat that morning, his eyes bloodshot from another night at the saloon. Can't even give me a son after all these years. Nora had tried to placate him as she always did. Harrison, please. I've made your favorite breakfast. The back of his hand had connected with her cheek before she could finish, sending her sprawling across the rough-hewn floorboards of their modest homestead. Their home sat isolated, 5 miles from the nearest neighbor and 10 from the small town of Whiteridge. I'm heading into town, he'd growled, pulling on his coat. When I return, I expect this place spotless and you properly repentant. But Harrison hadn't gone to town. Instead, he'd circled back, watching from the barn as Nora had hurriedly packed a small carpet bag. After 6 years of bruises hidden beneath long sleeves and fabricated stories about clumsiness told to the doctor, she'd finally summoned the courage to leave. She hadn't heard him approach until his shadow fell across her. Planning a trip, my dear wife. What followed was a blur of violence that ended with Nora being dragged across their property to the root cellar, a small, earthen room built into the side of a hill where they stored vegetables and preserved foods. Harrison, please, she'd begged as he shoved her down the 3 narrow steps. Don't do this. Till death do us part, Nora, he'd sneered, slamming the heavy wooden door. The sound of the iron bar sliding into place had sealed her fate. I'll tell everyone you ran off with a passing salesman. No one will question it. Now, hours later, Nora sat on the packed dirt floor. Her elegant fingers, once the pride of her piano teacher back east, scraped raw from trying to dig between the wooden planks of the door. The air grew stale as the small space trapped the heat of the day. 2 small shelves of preserves and a barrel of potatoes were her only companions. Help, she cried periodically, though she knew no one would hear. Their nearest neighbor, the widowed Mrs. Sullivan, was too far to hear even if Nora screamed until her voice gave out. As the small shaft of light that filtered through a crack in the door began to fade with the setting sun, Nora accepted the terrible truth. Harrison meant for her to die slowly in this earthen tomb. Miles away, Mitchell Powell guided his horse along the winding trail that led through the foothills. 2 years as a ranch hand at the Triple R had earned him enough to buy his own small spread, but the isolation of ranching life sometimes weighed heavy on his soul. At 32, Mitch had seen enough of the world to know what mattered: honesty, hard work, and treating others with dignity. His trip to town had been productive supplies purchased, mail collected, and a promise of work breaking horses for Old Man Jenkins next month. As dusk approached, Mitch decided to take the back trail home, a shortcut that would lead him past the Lloyd property. He'd met Harrison Lloyd a few times and found the man disagreeable at best. There were whispers in town about how he treated his Eastern wife, but in these parts, a man's home was his castle and few interfered in domestic matters. As Mitch approached the Lloyd homestead, something felt wrong. The property seemed too quiet, lacking the usual signs of evening activities. No smoke rose from the chimney despite the cooling spring air. No lanterns glowed in the windows. "Whoa, Rusty," Mitch murmured to his chestnut gelding, pulling to a stop at the edge of the property. He wasn't one to trespass, but the prickling sensation at the back of his neck, the same one that had saved him during the war, told him something wasn't right. "Hello," he called out, dismounting and approaching the main house. "Anyone home? It's Mitch Powell, just passing through." No response came except for the nervous nickering of a horse in the barn. Mitch tied Rusty to the hitching post and stepped onto the porch. The front door stood slightly ajar. "Mr. Lloyd, Mrs. Lloyd." The interior of the home showed signs of a struggle: an overturned chair, broken dishes on the floor, and most disturbing, drops of blood leading toward the back door. Mitch's hand instinctively moved to the revolver on his hip. Following the trail outside, he noticed bootprints leading toward a small mound in the distance, the root cellar, he realized. As he approached, he heard a faint, hoarse cry for help. Inside the cellar, Norah had lost track of time. The complete darkness disoriented her, and thirst clawed at her throat. The temperature had dropped considerably with nightfall, and she huddled against a shelf for warmth. When she heard footsteps above, hope surged through her veins. "Help!" she croaked, her voice barely audible after hours of shouting. "Please, someone help me." Outside, Mitch froze when he heard the weak cry. He rushed to the cellar door, finding it secured with a heavy iron bar. "Hello, is someone in there?" he called. "Yes." The woman's voice sounded desperate. "Please help me. My husband locked me in here to die, Mrs. Lloyd." "It's Mitchell Powell. I'm going to get you out, madam." Mitch examined the door. The bar was solid iron, secured into metal brackets on either side. He attempted to slide it free, but it had been jammed in place, possibly intentionally bent. "Mrs. Lloyd, the bar is stuck. I'm going to have to break the door. Stand back if you can." Inside, Norah scrambled away from the door, pressing herself against the far wall. "I'm clear," she called. Mitch braced himself, then rammed his shoulder against the wooden door. The impact sent pain shooting through his body, but the door held firm. Setting his jaw, he tried again, throwing his full weight against it. The wood creaked but didn't give. Drawing a deep breath, Mitch stepped back. Years of breaking horses, hauling feed, and working cattle had made him strong. He positioned himself, then drove forward with everything he had, his hands gripping the edges of the door as his body slammed into it. The wood splintered with a satisfying crack. One more powerful blow, and the door gave way, pieces of timber falling into the cellar as Mitch caught himself on the door frame. In the dim twilight, he saw her, a slender woman with auburn hair falling loose around her shoulders, her face streaked with dirt and tears, a dark bruise forming on her cheek. Despite her condition, there was a dignity in how she held herself, shoulders straight, eyes alert and intelligent. "Mrs. Lloyd," Mitch said gently, extending his hand. "Norah," she whispered. "My name is Norah." She took his outstretched hand, her fingers ice cold against his warm palm. As he helped her climb the steps out of the cellar, she stumbled, weak from hours of confinement. Without hesitation, Mitch swept her into his arms, carrying her toward the house. "No," she protested weakly. "Not there, he'll come back." "Where is your husband now?" Mitch asked, setting her carefully on the porch steps instead. "Town, I think. Drinking?" She shivered violently. "He said when he returns, I'll be properly repentant." Anger flashed in Mitch's eyes, but he kept his voice gentle. "You need water and food. Wait here." He returned quickly with a canteen and some jerky from his saddlebag. As Norah drank gratefully, Mitch surveyed the property, alert for any sign of Harrison's return. "Mrs. Lloyd, Norah, we need to get you away from here. Do you have family you can go to?" She shook her head, lowering the canteen. "No one who would take me in against my husband's wishes. I was planning to leave today, head to Tucson and find work as a teacher, but he caught me packing." Her hand touched the bruise on her face unconsciously. "I have a small ranch about 2 hours' ride from here," Mitch said. "You'd be safe there until we can sort this out properly." Norah hesitated. Going with a strange man, even one who had just saved her life, was risky. But staying meant certain death when Harrison returned. "Why would you help me?" she asked, searching his face for ulterior motives. Mitch's expression remained earnest. "Because it's the right thing to do, madam. And because no one deserves to be treated this way, especially not by someone who vowed to cherish them." His words, simple but sincere, convinced her. "I need to gather a few things if I'm truly leaving." "Be quick," Mitch cautioned. "We don't know when he'll return." Inside the house, Norah moved with purpose despite her weakened state. She grabbed the carpet bag she'd packed earlier, adding a photograph of her parents, a small wooden box containing her mother's locket, and the money she'd secretly saved, $37 hidden inside a hollowed-out book. As she turned to leave, her eyes fell on Harrison's shotgun mounted above the fireplace. After a moment's hesitation, she took it down, checking that it was loaded before tucking it under her arm. When she emerged, Mitch raised an eyebrow at the shotgun but said nothing. He helped her onto Rusty, then mounted behind her, his arms creating a protective circle as he took the reins. They were barely beyond the property line when they heard the distant sound of galloping hooves approaching from town. "Harrison," Norah whispered, her body tensing. Mitch urged Rusty off the trail and into the cover of a stand of cottonwoods. They watched as Harrison Lloyd, clearly drunk and swaying in the saddle, rode up to the house. Even from a distance, they could hear his angry calls when he discovered the broken cellar door. "You're dead, Norah." He bellowed into the night. "You hear me? Dead." Mitch felt Norah trembling against him. "He won't find you," he promised quietly. "I won't let him hurt you again." When Harrison disappeared into the house, Mitch guided Rusty deeper into the trees, taking a roundabout path toward his property. The journey was slow, with Mitch careful to cover their tracks and avoid the main trails. Norah remained silent, but Mitch could feel the tension in her body gradually easing as they put distance between themselves and her husband. By the time they reached Mitch's modest ranch, the moon hung high in the sky. The small cabin, nestled against a backdrop of rugged hills, looked welcoming with its sturdy log construction and wide front porch. "It's not much," Mitch said as he helped her dismount, "but it's peaceful." "It's beautiful," Norah replied honestly, taking in the simple, well-maintained homestead. Inside, Mitch lit a lamp and stoked the banked fire in the stone fireplace. The cabin was sparsely furnished but clean, with a table and chairs, a small kitchen area, bookshelves lined with volumes that surprised Norah, and 2 doors leading to what she presumed were bedrooms. "You'll take my room," Mitch said, gesturing to one door. "I'll sleep out here." Norah started to protest, but exhaustion overwhelmed her. "Thank you," she said instead, "for everything." That night, despite sleeping in a stranger's bed, Norah slept more peacefully than she had in years. The knowledge that Harrison couldn't reach her, combined with the quiet strength of the man who had saved her, allowed her to finally relax. Morning brought clarity and new concerns. As Norah joined Mitch for a simple breakfast of coffee, biscuits, and bacon, reality intruded on their temporary sanctuary. "Harrison won't stop looking for me," she said quietly. "And in the eyes of the law, I'm still his wife. I have no right to leave him." Mitch considered her words as he poured more coffee. The law might recognize his claim, but that doesn't make it right. No one has the right to imprison or harm another person, married or not. "Try telling that to the sheriff," Norah said bitterly. "Sheriff Danvers and Harrison play poker together every Thursday. Then we'll go above Sheriff Danvers. The territorial marshal visits Silver Springs every month. He's a fair man from what I hear." Hope flickered in Norah's eyes, then dimmed. "That's 3 weeks away. Harrison will find me by then." "Not if he thinks you've gone," Mitch said. "I need to go into town today anyway. I'll spread word that I saw a woman matching your description boarding the eastbound stage yesterday." Norah watched him thoughtfully. "Why are you doing all this for me? You don't even know me." Mitch's hands, calloused from years of ranch work, wrapped around his coffee mug. "My sister," he said finally. "She married a man who seemed kind at first. By the time we realized what was happening behind closed doors, it was too late." He met Norah's gaze steadily. "I couldn't help her." "But I can help you." The raw honesty in his voice touched something in Norah. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen. Over the next few days, a tentative routine developed. Mitch worked his ranch tending cattle, mending fences, and preparing for spring planting while Norah recovered her strength. She insisted on earning her keep, taking over cooking and helping with household tasks. In the evenings, they talked. Mitch learned that Norah had come west as a young bride at 20, full of romantic notions about frontier life. Harrison had seemed charming and ambitious during their brief courtship in Philadelphia, but his true nature emerged once he had her isolated on their homestead. "My father died shortly after our wedding," Norah explained one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Mother followed 6 months later. With no family left and all my inheritance transferred to Harrison, I had nowhere to go." "You have options now," Mitch assured her. "You're educated, capable. You could still teach in Tucson like you planned." Norah nodded, but her expression remained troubled. "Harrison would find me eventually. A divorced woman or worse, a runaway wife has few protections." Mitch learned more about Norah with each passing day. She was well-read, with opinions on everything from politics to poetry. Her hands, once soft from genteel Eastern living, had grown capable during her years on the frontier. She could shoot straight, preserve vegetables, and even help deliver a calf, as she proved when one of Mitch's heifers had a difficult birth. For her part, Nora discovered that Mitchell Powell was unlike any man she had known. He worked hard from sunrise to sunset, yet found time to read philosophy by lamplight. He treated his animals with gentle firmness and spoke to Nora as an equal, valuing her thoughts and suggestions. When Mitch returned from town a week after their escape, his expression was grim. "Harrison's been asking questions all over the county," he reported. "He's offering a $50 reward for information about you." Nora's hands trembled as she set down the pot of stew she'd prepared. "Did anyone suspect you?" "No, the story about the eastbound stage seems to have taken." "He's focused on tracking you east." Mitch hesitated. "But there's more. He's claiming you stole money and valuables before running off." "That's absurd. The only money I took was what I earned selling eggs and butter in town, money he didn't even know about." "I believe you," Mitch said quickly. "But it complicates things. Theft is something the law takes seriously, even if the accusations are false." That night, unable to sleep, Nora slipped outside to sit on the porch steps. The vast expanse of stars overhead usually brought her comfort, but tonight they only emphasized how small and vulnerable she felt. She didn't hear Mitch join her until he draped a blanket around her shoulders. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, sitting beside her. "They're not worth that much," she replied with a sad smile. "Just wondering how my life came to this. I had such dreams once." "Dreams can change," Mitch said quietly. "Doesn't mean they have to end." They sat in companionable silence for a while, the night sounds of the desert creating a peaceful backdrop. "Tell me about your dreams," Nora finally said. "You've heard all about my past, but you rarely speak of yours." Mitch looked out at the darkened landscape. "Simple dreams, I suppose." "This land, a herd that grows each year, good horses." He paused. "Family someday, when the right person comes along." His words hung in the air between them, laden with unspoken meaning. In the pale moonlight, Nora studied his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the kindness in his eyes, the quiet dignity that defined everything about him. "I should have had the courage to leave years ago," she whispered. "Before things got so bad." Mitch turned to her. "Courage isn't about never being afraid, Nora. It's about facing your fears when the moment comes. Like you did when you packed that bag, like you're doing now." Impulsively, Nora reached for his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and reassuring. They stayed that way until the chill of the night drove them back inside. The following days brought a shift in their relationship. Small touches, a hand on a shoulder, fingers brushing while passing a plate became common. Their conversations grew deeper, punctuated by shared laughter and meaningful glances. 2 weeks after her rescue, Nora was hanging laundry while Mitch repaired a corral fence nearby. The domesticity of the scene struck her suddenly, how natural it felt to be here, working alongside him, building something that felt increasingly like a home. The sound of approaching horses shattered the peaceful moment. "Mitch," she called, her voice tight with alarm. He was at her side instantly, his body tense as he scanned the horizon. 3 riders approached from the east, and Nora recognized the center figure immediately. "Harrison," she whispered, unconsciously stepping closer to Mitch. "Get inside," he said quietly. "Take the shotgun and go to the back room. If things go badly, there's a horse saddled in the corral. Ride north to the Wilkins place." "I won't leave you to face him alone," Nora protested. "This isn't up for debate," Mitch said firmly. "Please, Nora." The rare command in his voice convinced her. She hurried inside, grabbing the shotgun before positioning herself near a window where she could see and hear what transpired. Outside, Mitch stood calmly on his porch, one hand resting casually near his holstered revolver as the 3 men rode into his yard. Harrison Lloyd was a bull of a man, with a florid face and small, mean eyes. Beside him rode Sheriff Danvers and a man Nora didn't recognize, likely a hired gun, judging by his appearance. "Powell," Harrison called, his voice slurred despite the early hour. "Nice place you've got here." "Lloyd," Mitch acknowledged with a nod. "Sheriff." "What brings you gentlemen to my property?" Harrison dismounted, swaying slightly. "Don't play dumb, you know why we're here. Where's my wife?" "I wasn't aware you'd lost her," Mitch replied evenly. "Cut the crap," Harrison spat. I know she's here, been asking around town. Several people saw you buying women's supplies. He gestured toward the laundry line where one of Nora's dresses hung. Unless you've taken to wearing dresses yourself. Sheriff Danvers cleared his throat. Mr. Powell, if you're harboring Mrs. Lloyd, that could constitute aiding a fugitive. She's wanted for theft and destruction of property. Interesting charges, Mitch said, his voice deceptively calm. Especially considering I found Mrs. Lloyd locked in a root cellar, left to die of thirst or starvation. That's a damn lie, Harrison bellowed, stepping forward menacingly. My wife ran off with valuables from our home. If she told you otherwise, she's lying to gain your sympathy. Inside, Nora's grip tightened on the shotgun. Through the window, she watched the third man shift his position, angling for a clear line to Mitch if trouble started. Sheriff, Mitch said, addressing Danvers directly, have you actually investigated these claims? Have you seen any evidence of the alleged theft, or are you simply taking the word of a man known to drink away his money and mistreat his wife? Sheriff Danvers looked uncomfortable. It's not my place to interfere in domestic matters, Powell. The law says a husband has rights to his wife's return. The law also says attempted murder is a crime, Mitch countered, which is what happened when he locked her in that cellar. Harrison's face darkened with rage. I've had enough of this. Step aside, Powell. I'm taking my wife home. She's not here, Mitch lied smoothly, and even if she was, she wouldn't be going anywhere with you. Inside, Nora saw Harrison's hand inch toward his gun. Without thinking, she threw open the door, stepping onto the porch with the shotgun raised. That's far enough, Harrison, she called, her voice stronger than she felt. All heads swiveled toward her. Harrison's surprise quickly turned to ugly satisfaction. There's my darling wife, he sneered. Sheriff, you're witnessing this. She's threatening me with a weapon. I'm protecting myself from a man who tried to kill me, Nora corrected, moving to stand beside Mitch. Sheriff Danvers, I'd like to file charges against Harrison Lloyd for attempted murder and years of physical abuse. The sheriff looked bewildered, clearly unprepared for this confrontation. Mrs. Lloyd, put down the weapon. We can discuss this civilly. There's nothing civil about what he did to me, Nora replied, though she lowered the shotgun slightly. Ask him about the root cellar, Sheriff. Ask him why he locked me in there. Harrison's face contorted. She's lying. She's always been unstable. Then how did she end up here? Mitch challenged. 20 miles from your property with bruises on her face and arms, the third man, silent until now, shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. Sheriff, I didn't sign on for this. You said we were retrieving stolen property, not forcing a woman back to a man she's clearly terrified of. Sheriff Danvers looked increasingly unsure. Lloyd, you told me this was a simple case of theft and abandonment. It is, Harrison insisted. She's my wife. The law says no man has the right to imprison or harm another, Mitch interrupted. Wife or not. A tense silence fell over the group. Nora's heart pounded so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it, but she kept the shotgun steady, her eyes locked on Harrison. Finally, Sheriff Danvers sighed heavily. Mrs. Lloyd, are you claiming your husband attempted to kill you? Yes, Nora said firmly. He locked me in our root cellar after beating me, telling me explicitly that he intended for me to die there. Mr. Powell found me by chance and broke the door open. The sheriff turned to Harrison. That true, Lloyd? Of course not, Harrison scoffed, but his eyes shifted away a tell Nora knew well from his years of lying. I propose a solution, Mitch said carefully. The territorial marshal will be in Silver Springs next week. Let him hear both sides and make a ruling. And in the meantime, the sheriff asked. Mrs. Lloyd stays here where she's safe, Mitch replied. You have my word she won't leave the territory before the hearing. Harrison started to protest, but the sheriff cut him off. That seems reasonable. Lloyd, you'll return to your property and await the marshal's arrival. Mrs. Lloyd will remain here under Mr. Powell's protection. He fixed Harrison with a stern look. And there will be no trouble from either side before then. The threat in his voice was clear. Even Harrison, drunk and angry as he was, recognized the wisdom of backing down for now. This isn't over, he growled as he mounted his horse. She's still my wife. As the three men rode away, Nora's legs finally gave out. The shotgun clattered to the porch as she sank down beside it, trembling violently. Mitch knelt beside her, his hands gentle as they covered hers. "You were magnificent," he said softly. "I was terrified," she confessed. "That's what makes it brave." His eyes searched hers. "Are you all right?" Nora nodded slowly. "I will be. It's the first time I've stood up to him, really stood up to him and survived. And it won't be the last time you stand your ground," Mitch said with conviction. The week leading up to the marshal's visit was tense. Nora alternated between hope and dread, preparing her testimony and gathering what evidence she could of Harrison's abuse. Mitch rode to neighboring ranches, quietly gathering statements from those who had witnessed Harrison's drunken rages or Nora's unexplained injuries over the years. The night before they were to ride into Silver Springs, Nora found herself unable to sleep again. This time, instead of going outside, she knocked softly on the door to what had become Mitch's room. "Nora," he asked, opening the door. He wore only trousers, his chest bare in the dim light. "Is something wrong?" "I'm afraid," she admitted. "Not just of tomorrow, but of what comes after. Even if the marshal believes me, what kind of life can I have? A divorced woman is barely better than a widow in most people's eyes." Mitch guided her to sit on the edge of his bed. "You're stronger than you know, Nora. Whatever happens tomorrow, you'll build a good life. How can you be so sure?" She asked, searching his face. "Because I've seen who you truly are," he said simply. "Not Harrison's version of you, or even the woman you were in Philadelphia. I've seen your courage, your resilience, your kindness." He hesitated, then took her hands in his. "I've seen the woman I've come to love." The declaration hung in the air between them. Nora's breath caught in her throat as she processed his words. "Love," she whispered. Mitch nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "I didn't plan it, didn't expect it, but there it is. I love you, Nora, and whatever happens tomorrow, that won't change." Tears welled in Nora's eyes. After years of being told she was worthless, unlovable, the simple sincerity in Mitch's words broke something open inside her. "I don't know if I remember how to love properly," she confessed. "Harrison took so much from me." "Then we'll learn together," Mitch said, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Day by day, if that's what you want." In answer, Nora leaned forward, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that began tentatively but quickly deepened. His arms encircled her gently, asking nothing, offering everything. When they finally parted, Nora rested her forehead against his. "I want to stay," she whispered. "Tonight, just to sleep, to feel safe." Mitch's smile was tender as he moved over, making space for her beside him. They lay together, his arm a protective circle around her waist, her head nestled against his shoulder. For the first time in years, Nora felt completely, unreservedly safe. The territorial marshal, a grizzled man named James Harker, listened impassively as both sides presented their case the next day. Harrison, surprisingly sober, painted a picture of a hysterical, ungrateful wife who had stolen from him and run away. Nora, with quiet dignity, recounted years of abuse culminating in her imprisonment in the root cellar. When Mitch testified about finding her, the condition she was in, and the state of the broken door, Marshal Harker's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Mr. Lloyd," he said finally, "do you deny locking your wife in the root cellar?" Harrison shifted uncomfortably. "It wasn't like that. She was hysterical. I needed her to calm down before she hurt herself. By leaving her without water or light for hours." The marshal's tone was skeptical. "And the door, was it necessary to bar it from the outside?" When Harrison couldn't provide a satisfactory explanation, the marshal turned to Sheriff Danvers. "Have you examined the cellar in question?" The sheriff admitted he hadn't. "Then I suggest you do so immediately," Marshal Harker said firmly. "In the meantime, I'm inclined to grant Mrs. Lloyd's petition for legal separation pending divorce proceedings." Harrison erupted in protest, but the marshal silenced him with a raised hand. "Furthermore, Mr. Lloyd, you will remain at least 500 yards from Mrs. Lloyd at all times. Any violation will result in your immediate arrest." As they rode back to Mitch's ranch that evening, Nora felt lighter than she had in years. The legal battle wasn't over. A formal divorce would take time, but the marshal's ruling gave her protection and legitimacy she hadn't dared hope for. "What will you do now?" Mitch asked as they stabled the horses. "I still want to teach," Nora replied, "but perhaps not in Tucson." She looked at him shyly. "I've grown rather fond of this part of the territory. Mitch's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. I was hoping you might say that. 3 months later, Nora stood on the porch of what was now their home, watching Mitch return from checking the herd. Her position as the new schoolteacher in nearby Cottonwood Springs had been secured, starting with the fall term. Harrison, faced with multiple testimonies about his behavior and clear evidence from the root cellar, had eventually accepted the inevitable. The divorce proceedings were underway, with the marshal ensuring fair division of property. As Mitch dismounted, his smile still took her breath away. Their wedding, a simple ceremony with the marshal officiating, was planned for the following week, once her divorce was finalized. How was town? She called as he approached. Good news, he replied, taking the porch steps 2 at a time. The bank approved our loan for the additional acreage. That's wonderful, Norah exclaimed as he swept her into his arms. Soon we'll have the largest herd in the county. And the finest teacher, Mitch added, kissing her softly. Though I'm more proud of that than any number of cattle. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds, Norah leaned against the man who had not only saved her life but shown her what love truly meant. From the darkest moment in the root cellar to this, a future bright with promise and possibility. I never thought I could be this happy, she confessed, her fingers intertwined with his. You deserve every happiness, Mitch replied, and I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you have it. The woman who had once been imprisoned by fear now stood tall, free to love and be loved in return. The root cellar that had nearly become her tomb had instead become the catalyst for her rebirth. And the man beside her, who had once broken down a door with his bare hands to save a stranger, had ultimately broken down the walls around her heart, helping her rebuild a life more beautiful than she had ever imagined possible.